So data, as you know, is a new oil, and you might have heard it when you are on the Gartner's website. So just like you have oil leaks, right? You also have data leaks, right? And the vast majority of criminals are aware of the fact that PII is something that is of grave importance, especially to regulators. And a lot of these data protection regulations, actually all of these data protection regulations, are on protecting personal data. Due to the fact that these attackers are aware that regulations like GDPR are imposing heavy fines on the companies that fail to do due diligence and due care, and they are not transparent about data breaches, that is something that the attackers are using to their advantage. And of course, depending upon the sector, your data could be more or less valuable, and therefore cyber criminals go after PII. And of course, there are so many monetization methods for cyber criminals when they are trying to make money by using data. So one is that they can simply sell that data on dark web. The other is like they could ask the company for the payment. Another technique is whereby we have seen the victims being targeted. And of course, that is more common with healthcare sector, because healthcare sector is more valuable than other sectors. The primary challenge that comes from data is when organizations decide that third party would be the ones who are going to process and store the data. And of course, a lot of organizations do not do due diligence when choosing their partners carefully. And what this leads to is when a breach happens, then of course, the organizations run into all sorts of legal trouble. So these days, more and more organizations are asking and demanding companies that process data to have SOC 2 certification. So of course, there is some awareness, but that is something that is not being mandated by regulations in a lot of countries. The other problem with the data is when you're storing the data, and especially when you're storing personally identified information, you are subject to all sorts of regulations. So you are subject to GDPR and any data protection regulations depending upon the jurisdiction that you are. A lot of times companies do not have adequate data retention policies, which means that they would keep storing data forever, which means that when the data leakage happens, the impact is huge, and as opposed to in case if the company decides to remove and eradicate data that is no longer of use. The other problem is when companies are storing PII, they are not encrypting the data at rest. So this is something that we haven't seen when we're doing our security audits and posture assessments. Absolutely, backups are compensating control. And in case if things go wrong, it is the backup that saves the company from all sorts of trouble, including legal trouble. If done accurately, I think a lot of these cybersecurity breaches that happen, the impact can be reduced, specifically in the case of ransomware. However, they should be complemented with other security controls, which would include detective and preventive controls, to make sure that a scenario does not arise whereby we would need backups. But of course, things can go wrong, not just from a cyber breach, but things can go wrong internally and you would need your backups to do it. One thing that we recommend to our customers is that they should have offline backups. So in case, if everything goes wrong, they have offline backups whereby they could use it to restore their data. Now, we have seen in scenarios whereby attacker gains hold of AWS or Amazon administrator account, and the attacker basically deletes the backup. And that's where, of course, companies relying upon online backup services, of course, is very difficult without having an offline backup system. We've also seen cyber criminals targeting third-party backup companies. Because of course, that is the gold mine for any attacker if they gain access to backups. And a lot of these third-party backup companies, despite of their claims, do not encrypt backups. And of course, even if they are encrypting the backups, they do not do proper key management, which would mean that if attacker manages to obtain the key, they are able to decrypt it. And of course, they could encrypt those backups with their own key so that the company is not able to access them and the customer is not able to restore them.